Welcome to the .NET Excel Library tutorial. In this video, I'll show you how to work with formulas in an Excel document using the Syncfusion .NET Excel Library. This includes adding a formula, using cross-sheet references, creating table formulas, applying named ranges, and working with array formulas in Excel. I will begin by opening an existing ASP.NET Core application, where I have already installed the Syncfusion XlsIO.NET Core package. If you want to know how to get started with the Syncfusion .NET Excel library, check the video link in the card above, or the description below. First, let me show you how to add a formula to an Excel document by clicking this button. To begin with, I open the index.cshtml file, remove the existing code, and add an Add Formula button to define its event handler. I navigate to the Home Controller class and import necessary namespace. Next, I define an action method with the return type ActionResult. In this method, I initialize an instance of XlsEngine and create an iApplication instance. I set the default Excel version to XlsX. Create a workbook and retrieve its first worksheet. I assign the value 10 to cell A1 and 20 to cell B1. In cell C1, I set a formula to calculate the sum of these two values. To export the Excel file, I define a helper method, export workbook, which creates a memory stream, saves the workbook to the stream, resets the stream position, and returns the file as a downloadable Excel document. Then, I invoke this method by passing the workbook and the file name. Now, I save and run the application. When I click this button, the Excel file will be downloaded. As you can see, cell C1 displays the sum of the values in cell A1 and B1, as specified in the formula. Next, let me show you how to use cross-sheet references in a formula. First, I add a button to use cross-sheet reference in a formula and define its corresponding action method with the return type iActionResult. In this method, I reuse the code from the previous method with a few modifications. I create an additional worksheet and update the sheet references to set values in the newly created worksheet. Then, I modify the formula to perform a cross-sheet calculation by adding values from two different worksheets. Lastly, I update the file name. When I click the button, the Excel file is downloaded. See, it displays the sum of the values from different worksheets as specified in the formula. Next, to use named ranges in a formula, I add a button and define its corresponding action method with the return type iActionResult. In this method, I reuse the code from the previous method with a few modifications. To define a name for a cell, I create an iname instance, add a name to it, and set its refers to range property to point to cell A1. I repeat the same steps to define another name. I change the name and the pointing cell accordingly. After defining both names, I update the formula to use the name ranges instead of direct cell references. Then, I update the file name. When I click the button, the Excel file is downloaded. Looking here, cell C1 displays the sum of the values from the name cells, as specified in the formula. Next, I will show you how to use an array formula in a range of cells. First, I add a button to use an array formula in a range of cells, and define an action method with the return type iActionResult. In this method, I reused the code from the previous example with a few modifications. I then set an array formula for the range A1 to D1, which fills the cells A1, B1, C1, and D1 with values 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next, I create a named range called arrayRange that refers to the range A1 to D1. Then, I set another array formula in the range A2 to D2 that adds 100 to each value from the range A1 to D1 and updates the file name for download. When I click the button, the Excel file is downloaded. As you can see, the added values in the cells appear as expected. Lastly, to add a table formula in an Excel document, I add a button and define an action method with the return type, iActionResult. Again, in this method, I reuse the code from the previous example with a few modifications. First, I create a table named Table1 in the range A1 to D3. Then, I set the column headers for the table. After that, I add 2 rows of data to the table. Next, I apply a table formula that multiplies each row's values in the rate and quantity columns. I also update the file name for download. When I click the button, the Excel file downloads. As you can see, the calculated values are correctly displayed in the total column, as specified in the formula. That's a wrap. In this video, I have shown you how to work with formulas in an Excel document using the Syncfusion .NET Excel Library. You can download a working example from the GitHub link in the description below. I have also shared a link where you can learn about obtaining a free license key to use our document SDK through our community license. If you found this video helpful, like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching.